So I have this huge problem when it comes to drawing, which is that I'm way too slow. So unfortunately, I'm also very impatient, but I also know you can't just snap your fingers and magically become a faster artist, because that takes a lot of practice. So what I decided to do instead was to figure out an illustration style that would be faster and easier so that I can get away with completing more than maybe one illustration a week. And what I landed on is something akin to a manga style, because I've always really liked manga. I liked how dynamic and exciting it looks. So if I can kind of take some of that energy and dynamism and put it into my own drawings, that's gonna be great. And that ended up being, well, surprisingly difficult. So I'm gonna share what I learned from doing all of these and any tips and tricks that I figured out along the way. So this pretty much happened after I finished my playthrough of Pokemon Legends ZA, and however you feel about the Pokemon Company and how their games are, that's gonna be great. And that ended up being, well, surprisingly difficult. So I'm gonna share what I learned from doing all of these and any tips and tricks that I figured out along the way. So this pretty much happened after I finished my playthrough of Pokemon Legends ZA, and however you feel about the Pokemon Company and how their games are. One thing that they never miss on is their character design for some reason. Arguably, you might say that their character design might even be better than their Pokemon designs. This is Corbo. He is some kind of One thing that they never miss on is their character design for some reason. Arguably, you might say that their character design might even be better than their Pokemon designs. This is Corbo. He is some kind of Japanese Yakuza-inspired character, I think? And this is odd, because this game takes place in Lumiose, which is the Pokemon version of Paris, I believe, and I have no idea what the Yakuza is doing in Paris. So right away you might notice that I like to use a kind of a weird pen here. Most people like to talk about how important line width is when it comes to making dynamic and exciting illustrations, but I don't like using it, and there isn't one specific reason for it. It's probably more accurate to say that I don't use pen pressure, right? Because pen pressure is probably one of the easiest way to get line width in your drawing. The eyes right now are a little bit thicker because I went over the line multiple times. The main thing about the pen I use is that no matter how hard I press, it won't actually get any thicker. For me, personally, that has a really big benefit in that I can focus solely on where the lines are supposed to go and not have to worry about the actual quality of the line just yet. And you can tell right now that I'm actually being super messy. There's a lot of gaps. The lines are almost kind of chicken scratchy. They're not joined up together. They're really messy. They're not smooth at all. But for now, I'm staying pretty zoomed out and trying to figure out the rough idea of the lines first before I go back in and clean them up. And by the way, if you want to get my brush, the brushes are actually all available on my Gumroad store, but if you click inside, you'll notice that I provided all the settings to recreate my brushes for free if you need. Clip Studio Paint only, by the way. Okay. Going back to Corbo here. Because he's mostly he has very dark hair and he's wearing a very dark suit, I decided to go back in there and use basically solid black for those areas. I've never really done this before, so one tricky thing I had to think about is how do I make his suit completely black without just having just one solid block of black, right? Where you can't see anything else. But when you look at some manga, one thing they do, I think, is that even though they use black to kind of fill it in, they leave some areas for highlights, which is also what I decided to do right now. See, right over here, I use a kind of messy brush and just basically not quite fill in the lines all the way. So there's some gaps showing, like right here. Like there's a hint of how the cloth is folded and wrinkled, okay? And in those white gaps, I basically tried to pay attention to the contour of the arm and hatch in roughly that direction to get a sense of volume as well. But mostly I think the hatching was for texture and for visual interest. One mistake that I see sometimes with cross-hatching is that sometimes I see people cross-hatching like this sometimes, yeah? Like, okay, I hatch in one direction like this, and then they hatch like this, and you get some sort of checkerboard pattern, and this checkerboard pattern doesn't usually look that appealing. I think it's better, for instance, let's say we have a cylinder here. You just want to kind of roughly follow the shape, the curve of the cylinder. And then when you go the other way, you still sort of do it, like, but make sure it's not at 90 degrees. So not quite at 90 degrees, I think. Generally looks a little bit better. You still get a sense of directionality, of curve, of contouring, of shape and volume, especially if you're hatching over a curved surface rather than something like that, which looks like a cloth weave, which is not what we're going for here. All right, then I ended up having to redraw Scolipede because I realized, considering this dude's size, that you'd probably be seeing Scolipede from below, so I tried to fix the perspective on that. So the base line art didn't really take too long, but then I found I really struggled with the hatching there because I couldn't add too much cross hatching like with Corbeau because Scolipede is not as dark colored as Corbeau is. At least I didn't want to make him entirely dark colored. It's kind of like a magenta color, I believe. I tried to show the curvature of the carapace here by adding these sort of like little hatch marks here, but I'm not really sure it worked. Like, looks like dirt more than anything else, right? So not too happy with that. So I never realized how much this is a problem for manga artists or people that draw only in black and white, because if you look right here, Corbeau is wearing black, Scolipede has a black belly, at least the way I've drawn it, but look how they kind of blend together here. How can I make them look like two separate entities? Right over here, I tried adding a white outline to see how it would look, but that looked a little artificial, so I wasn't the biggest fan. So what I thought to do instead was to add this sort of white fog on the bottom, so that you can clearly see the separation between the Pokemon trainer and the Pokemon. At the moment, I'm still using shades of gray to figure out the overall value composition of this. The nice thing about Clip Studio Paint is that you can work in gray first, and then afterwards you can convert to screen tone, which is what I was planning to do. I think one really big benefit of working in values like this is that it let me practice composition. One thing that I kind of don't really do very much is do interesting compositions. I kind of stick to like, hey, there's a character or something standing in a white void, which I guess, right? But it's not very interesting. So I took the opportunity to figure out more interesting ways of drawing my character. So what I tried here is that, like, hey, I had this idea, like, you know, Scolipede's kind of a bendy question mark shape. What if I kind of wrap him around Corbeau's head like this? And the most important thing when it comes to composition is the values. So it was an excellent opportunity to practice for me. Then I just add some screen tones on top. Oh yeah, right, here it is. I actually did end up completely redoing the hatching because holy, I don't know what I'm doing there. A little splash of color because why not? Just because I'm going for a manga-esque aesthetic, it doesn't mean that I'm actually stuck doing only black and white because it's not really a manga. And essentially the final result looks like this, which, yeah, I'm pretty happy with that. This was my first attempt. It didn't really take as little time as I wanted, but I'm pretty sure if I tried my usual strategy of trying to color it, it would have taken way longer. But there was actually one really major problem. Now this looks fine because this is my corrected version. When I first posted it, it looks like this. Here, it's particularly bad on Blue Sky actually, because look at this checkerboard pattern, and when you zoom in, and this is what's known as a moire pattern. Basically, when you have a regular pattern of dots or something like that, they can combine to form undesirable patterns. I can show you how it works right now on Clip Studio Paint. So we delete all these and have this sort of shade of gray. So like I said, Clip Studio Paint, you can just go ahead and go right here and click on Screen Tone. You can kind of see this pattern appearing and disappearing at certain zoom percentages, right? So here, oh, look, very strong checkerboard here. It's not so bad here. And this pattern can be very distracting, especially if it's unintended, right? Look how strong this pattern is. Not the best looking, so how can I solve this? That's what I tried to do for my second drawing, I believe. So the next character. All right, this is Naveen. I think he's a pretty fun character. I think his character design is really cool. He's an interesting character that happens to be obsessed with fashion, and he likes a particular streamer. He is like a tier 3 Twitch subscriber. I'm certain of it. I like his attitude. He has this air of nonchalance. Until you talk bad about his favorite Twitch streamer, you know? But before I talk about the screen tone moire pattern thing, let's just talk about the sketch first, okay? Okay, so for this drawing, I decided to keep it relatively simple. Just kind of a half-body drawing, and I wanted to express his love and his devotion to his favorite streamer, so I was gonna put a canary plush right over here. So I pretty much followed the same strategy as with the Corbeau drawing. I kept the inking pretty simple the first time around, and then went back in and added the detail I wanted. So one new thing I tried here is that I tried blending the hair shading to give it a more interesting texture. I don't think it really worked all that well because when I had the layer turned on screen tone mode, because as I showed you before, you can like literally enable and disable screen tone mode whenever you want. The blurring kind of acted kind of strangely, and I wasn't used to how it acted, right? I was like, that's cool, I guess. If you disable it, then you realize it looks like this. I'm not sure how much I liked it, but that was one thing I tried. This whole thing, pretty straightforward, but there was one major issue I had when I got near the end and I was figuring out the values, yeah? Right about here. The canary plushie is supposed to be the focal point of this illustration, right? That's the whole point, is that like he's tightly holding his fave in his arms. But from the values, it's like really hard to pick out. I think if I had the use of color, it would have been easier because Canary has a very different color scheme to Naveen, and she would have stood out in that way. But if I'm only using black and white, I don't really have the luxury of that. So one thing I tried was kind of adding some fog behind the plushie or adding a really strong rim light because I really needed to make it stand out in some way. So something like that, but I don't know. I tried making that thing colorful, but that looked weird as well. I didn't like that either. So then I literally just added a really strong overhead light coming down on the plushie. Now, realistically, this makes basically zero sense. Why is there a light on the plushie alone, but not on Naveen at all? But sometimes when you're drawing, you can take a few creative liberties to make the drawing better, even if it doesn't actually make sense. It's really important that the audience's eye is drawn to that plushie. So even though this cannot happen in real life, this is what I chose to do. And now comes the next question, which is like, so remember that moire pattern problem I had with Corbo? How do I fix that with Naveen? So I actually had a strat, okay? So I did a whole bunch of stuff. And then eventually I think I ended up saving it into an auto action, and I'll show you how this auto action works. So let's just go back here. So remember I do this, and I do this, and you get this nasty moire pattern, right? So what I end up doing, if I go into that auto action I made, I can show you what I did. It's called non-moire screen tone. Start by creating a new raster layer on top of it. So I make a new raster layer on top, and I put Perlin noise on top. So just right here. So I'm hoping that the Perlin noise will kind of disrupt the regularity of the pattern enough so that I don't have to deal with the moire pattern. So I clip it below right here. Then I believe I set it to overlay, and then I just kind of turn the opacity low enough so you can't really see it. Then I merge it down. Now I come over here. Now I turn on the screen tone effect, but as you can see, there's still a moire pattern. One thing that I saw might help it is changing the angle from 45 to something else. I changed it to 30. It actually helps a little bit now, just due to the way pixels work. I don't think you can avoid it entirely, but it's better. But one final touch I did was to rasterize this. Then I go right here, blur, do a very, very light blur on it. Because like obviously you would not want to do this if you're actually printing your comic, your manga in a book. But since I'm not printing it, doesn't matter, it's for digital. And this is how it turns out. It's not entirely eliminated. I guess at certain zooms, you can see that pattern still, but I think it's a lot better. Well, check it out here. Like, yeah, you can kind of see it, but I think it's much improved from whatever the hell was going on here, right? It's a lot better. But this drawing is a little bit bland, I would say. Just a waist-up drawing of a character doing not much else, so for my next drawing, I wanted to go a little bit more ambitious. Here's the next character, Jacinth. I love her design. She looks so cool. Let me just show you which part I wanted to draw. So Jacinth, I think, is a pretty interesting character. She has a almost Fae-like attitude. She's flighty and unpredictable, and you can't really tell what she's thinking at any point. And she's super, super flashy. So when she megas, it looks like this, I believe. Like, look at that, like, eye thing, right? That's cool. So that's what I wanted to draw, okay? She's so extra. And for what? Who knows? So let's draw it. First thing I tried was to pretty much directly, do that whole hand pose thing because she looked so cool and I want to express that in an illustration. So I just draw and I draw and I draw and I draw and I adjust and I draw. I don't know about you guys, but this looks sort of bad to me. It doesn't look good at all. It's super static because she's so symmetrical. What if I kind of move her off to one side? Rule of thirds in composition. Maybe that'll look cooler, right? And you guys know what the rule of third is. Yeah, the rule of thirds in composition means that it's typically a good idea to put the focal point in one of these little dots over here, okay? So I was trying to do that. I'm like, okay, I guess this is how it works. But like, the pose itself is just way too boring. I'm really trying to make this work, but it just doesn't look good to me. So the best thing to do, sometimes I think it's best to just kind of scrap it and start over, which is what I did here. So instead of having like a super symmetrical composition, let's do something a little bit more dynamic and angled. We can still do the hand thing, but let's do it from a different viewpoint. So I ended up with something like this, and I was so glad I started over. I feel like every time I get discouraged and start again, I'm basically never regret it. The second go around, now that I've learned so much from the first failures, always goes better. So the sketching phase went way more smoothly this time. One thing I also want to mention is that one thing I was trying when I was doing this series of drawing is that I wanted to try using looser and messier sketches. One problem I used to have when I was first starting out with digital art is that I would get really nervous whenever it came to inking, and I wanted to make sure I knew exactly where my lines went when I was inking so that I wouldn't make any mistakes. This makes sense if you're inking traditionally, of course, because if you draw the wrong line with a fine liner, you can't undo. But of course, this is digital art, and you can undo. So I realized I was doing so many sketches and making them perfect and clean so I wouldn't make mistakes for inking, and I was spending way longer than I had to on my drawings for no particular reason. So I think loosening up on this sketch did end up saving me quite a lot of time. So over here, I'm going back in, cleaning up lines again, and people might be wondering, so I do choose to thicken some lines, even though I don't do it on the first pass. But how do I decide which lines to thicken? Is there some kind of logic to this? And the answer is yes, there is. There is no one correct way of doing it because lines don't actually exist in real life, okay? So as an artist, when you choose to add thickness to your lines, it can be for whatever reason you like. Some people like to add thickness on the outside of the character. Personally, I like to add thickness when two planes are touching. And then we get something called ambient occlusion. So if you take a look at this photo right over here. So if we zoom into this, we'll notice that like right over here, for instance, and here, there are these super dark shadows. So basically where they're touching and the light can't bounce out of these crevices and reach your eyeball. So they appear as very, very dark shadows. So that's essentially where I like to thicken my lines here, to basically simulate these ambient occlusion shadows. The values here were pretty simple, so I just add some values I thought would suit the illustration. Kept it pretty simple, white background. Over here, I wanted to make sure that the hand was standing out appropriately from her face, so I added a very subtle gradient behind the hand just to make it pop out a little bit more. And then just a bit of shadow to the hair to make it recede into the background. A light kind of vignette effect. Just to draw focus to the focal point, which is her eye. Because she felt like such a sparkly character to me, I wanted to make her eyes really stand out, so I did end up spending some time on making some super sparkly eyes. I'm not really good at drawing these like super sparkly anime eyes, so I was kind of floundering a little bit and just adding random shapes and colors and hoping it worked out. I'm just like adding circles here, adding a blob here, I don't really know what I'm doing. And I think adding the star really helps. Makes her look more fairy type, yeah? Although I think I started by making it a little bit too extreme. It's a little much. We don't have to overdo it. And use the same kind of strategy for the screen tone as before to make sure I didn't have too much of a moire pattern. Anyway, just saying, here she is. So next, I wasn't really sure what I wanted to draw next. A friend asked me to draw the tall maid woman, which I assume they meant Le Ban. So she looks really interesting because when you first encounter her, she acts very demure. She is dressed in a maid outfit, so her poise and her personality seems to match that kind of maid attire that she's dressed in. But if you look not too closely, it's pretty obvious, but if you look at her, something seems a little bit off because even though she seems so docile and polite and well-mannered, she has very sharp features. Her eyes are super sharp. And if you look really close, you'll notice that she has piercings, although they're empty right now. She has piercing holes, like multiple piercing holes in each of her ears. Turns out, she's been pretending to be demure this entire time. And she's a little bit more like this. Very demure, but not. Okay. I wanted to capture this ferocity that the Pokemon Company seems to like to give its dragon-type trainers these days, so let's get into that. So I try to show most of that personality.
plain NPCs?
in the pose. So this time I try to draw a little bit more of the character rather than just like a face, like what I had for Jacinth. Maybe something more full body-ish, at least showing some of the legs, because I don't think I've drawn a single leg this entire time. At this stage, I'm keeping it really, really loose because I'm just trying to figure out the composition and her overall pose. I don't really care about anatomy or accuracy or anything like that. It's just kind of getting a rough idea of what the drawing's gonna look like. So basically, I'm trying to keep my sketch relatively simple. I'm trying to make sure that the forms I'm using are clear and obvious, even though I don't add, say, the ruffles on the sleeves or on the headpiece, right? But like you can tell that it is some sort of this weird conical shape. And here, I think, is where I make a mistake. So I was talking about how I wanted to go fast and stuff, which is why I shouldn't make the sketch too detailed, but like, here I am, doing a second pass. This is exactly what I should not be doing. I'm doing all the problem solving in a second sketch. But why? I could have literally done that in the ink. This is still the sketch, man. This is the second sketch. I'm still going for it. Being more confident and certain of where my lines are going when I'm inking makes me more comfy, but oh my gosh, having to redraw the same thing 3 times is very time consuming. The next question is like, okay, Dragage. If you look for Dragage, right? Let's find Dragage right here, actually. I was trying to draw Dragage behind her, but you notice that the angle I'm trying to draw it from is like kind of from below, right? But like, this is a weird looking Pokemon. I think they're meant to look like those seahorses or sea dragons that kind of look like floating pieces of kelp for camouflage. I just did not know what I was doing. Dragage is just a weird looking Pokemon. But fortunately, like I said, I just finished this game. So that means I can just find my own reference. What does Dragage look like from below? Well, let's find out, shall we? So, yeah, that is how I found my Dragage references. Look at my trainer, by the way. The character customization in this game is kind of surprisingly good. Okay, anyway. Now that I had a good reference, I could actually just properly figure out the shape of the Dragage, which is still a really weird shape, by the way, but it was much easier now that I had proper reference. Definitely less bulky than I had drawn him the first time around. Now for the inking! And yes, it went smooth and easy, because I had spent so much time on the sketch, but I wish I had not. And again, I needed to make sure that Dragage kind of recedes into the background, so it doesn't look like they kind of merge into one form. So I kind of added some atmospheric fog here, just to make sure that Laban stood up properly. Splash of color like I did for everything else. I was trying to make it look like that Dragage was mega evolving, but I think I overdid it here and changed it to keep it a bit simpler right here. And here's how it turned out. Cool. All right, next we have Canary. Canary, here's how it turned out. And changed it to keep it a bit simpler right here. And here's how it turned out. Flash of color like I did for everything else. I was trying to make it look like that Dragage was mega evolving, but I think I overdid it here and did it for everything else. I was trying to make it look like that Dragage was mega evolving.
It looks so good with the white background.
But I think I overdid it here and changed it to keep it a bit simpler right here. And
Okay. Yeah, the black, the white background. It would have been better with a gradient of like going up to white, or just to contrast that. and then have everything focused right here, or just white. It was perfect. Yeah, just
Here's how it turned out. Cool. All right, next we have Canary. Canary is essentially a streamer, an in-game streamer. So one other thing about Canary is that she is not a good loser, okay? She's a very sore loser. Of course, this being a game for children, she's not very hard to beat. You beat her up, whatever. Yeah, but however, she does not take it well. She reacts in the way that you would expect a streamer to react. I thought that was a kind of a fun moment, and I wanted to draw that. But this time, I wanted to keep things even simpler. At this point, I was feeling a little bit burnt out because I was drawing so many elaborate poses, like the Laban one. I didn't draw too much of the character, but the composition was relatively ambitious for my standards. So this time, I really, really wanted to keep it simple. Basically, just a half body, and I wanted to focus on her expression rather than having a very cool and elaborate composition. I have a little bit of a problem when it comes to illustrations, okay? Because I have a sort of mental block almost in my head that prevents me from starting illustrations because I'm always thinking, oh, if I'm going to draw something, an illustration, it has to be really high effort. I always feel the need to do some sort of really fancy perspective, like a bottom up, top down, or a very complex pose, or else it's not worthy of being an illustration, right? But it doesn't have to be this way. Illustration, drawing is about communication. I can choose to communicate it however I like, and this time is just a simple kind of bust up pose where I would focus primarily on the expression. And because this was less ambitious, the perspective is super simple, the pose is relatively easy. The only maybe challenging part was the hand because I stink at drawing hands. This went a lot more smoothly and it was a lot easier to do than any of the previous illustrations, with the exception of maybe Naveen. And it was turning out okay, but like, so here is kind of a problem with simple compositions, right? Because she wasn't doing any sort of interesting pose or there wasn't any kind of interesting perspective. The drawing looks pretty static and boring. It's just kind of like, oh, it's just standing there and it's very symmetrical.
okay. That's one of the main problems with. See, this is a good drawing. When you actually look at it, it's actually a really great drawing. It's a really great drawing. But the problem with that mindset is actually what I have a problem with, like modern storytelling, because a lot of modern storytelling, a lot of like visual artists, a lot of writers aren't visual artists. They're imagining a movie in their head, but they're imagining the dialogue and the feeling of it. So they just draw scenes where it's just like, hey, I'm gonna have them have a dialogue sit at a diner and do nothing else. Here, she's an artist. She's a visual artist. She wants to do something engaging. She wants to just do something like, hey, I want something like fast paced. I want Goku versus Brawly, like having Brawly bashing his face against the eye. I was thinking that like the entire time, drawing against that. But the problem is just like this is such a good drawing. It's such a good drawing already because look at the eyes and the mouth. That's all you need. You just need the expression. You don't need to add in like another background. You can add in like a little like exclamation mark or a bubble to make it do stuff. That's the one problem I had when making my webcomic at the beginning because I thought I had to do every single background with a detail. I had to do everything. I had to make all this stuff. But it's really, no, you just need to get the certain emotion, make it have a little bit of a movement, and that's all you need. Like this is already perfect. Like she just needs to add in like a little bit of shading, a little bit of all that stuff around here. Just shading, shading where right here, just right here. Just put some shading right here, some right there. Get the eyes and everything, and then just like have the shading go right here, and then like put the eye outlines, and then just kind of have this be like a little bit less like detailed, like just little marks right there, little marks right there, and then it's a finished piece. It's just a finished piece. She can even finish it like that, and people will be like, "Oh my god, that's so amazing!" Because of the motion of like, Well, oh, it's just like that's all she needs.
It's not interesting at all. However, I do actually have a way of fixing this. If it's looking a little bit too boring, all you gotta do is tilt it. You'll notice here that suddenly she's
That's a good idea.
kind of tilted to the side, and suddenly it looks a little bit more dynamic. There's more going on. It's less symmetrical. I didn't actually change any part of the drawing, but it looks more exciting already. Hooray! And again, I try to keep the rule of thirds in mind, and I kind of try to keep her face in one of those rule of thirds intersections to at least make sure that the composition had an interesting focal point. For the splash of color in this one, I decided to kind of draw her dialogue in the background. So let's go ahead and do that. All right, so I made a very weird decision right now, which is I turned on the grid, as you can see here. I turned on the grid, and I very neatly wrote all of these censored swear words in the background and made sure they all were all nicely aligned. But if you really think about it, that doesn't actually make a whole lot of sense, because when you're kind of cussing something out like that, you probably want to show the chaos and the energy, and having them all neatly line up in a row is probably not the best way of showing that. But then I just start again. I turn off the grid, and then I just go nuts. The whole point is that it's messy, so I make sure to do that instead. And I think this looks so much better. Then I just adjust the colors a little bit, add a bit of a zoomy effect on the lines just to make it look more energetic and full of action, since the pose itself and the drawing itself is pretty static. I will, compensate by adding action lines to make it look like that something is happening, even though nothing is really happening. All right, next one.
So I like this. I like what she did. See where the cross hatching's at is right here. The cross hatching is right there and everything because she understands the focal point is right here. But if you don't have anything on the side to block your brain and go right here, and you see how the shading, the next point of shading is technically right here. So you're actually you're looking right here, and then your eyes stop, might go over here, but it stops. It bounces your eyes always back right there. That's the whole point of drawing your eyes and everything. And here's another part where I made mistakes. See this whole empty area right here? This whole empty area? I used to think I had to paint everything, had to draw everything in here. She understands you don't. You just need to draw the line and the form, and then this makes this, and everything just combines together. It's so good. Oops.
And having them all neatly line up, and then I just go nuts. The whole point is that it's messy, so I make sure to do that instead. And I think this looks so much better. Then I just adjust the colors a little bit, add a bit of a zoomy effect on the lines just to make it look more energetic and full of action, since the pose itself and the drawing itself is pretty static. I will, compensate by adding action lines to make it look like that something is happening, even though nothing is really happening. All right, next one. So this whole time I've been using screen tones and kind of getting a manga-like effect, but if we actually look at some manga, so I'll show you some manga panels right now. If we actually look at some, as much as I would like to avoid it, right? Good, excellent mangaka.
She's looking at the best of the best, the best of the best of these are splash art, amazing artwork from the best in the world. Here, let me get some basic Naruto stuff. Actually, we're going to look at One Piece. So, we're going to go right there. I'm actually going to turn this. Yeah, look at that. That's just a basic scene. That's just a basic scene of just black and white. One Piece is a great example of the opposite of this. Because here's the best scene in the panel. Right here, this is a horrible thing. That's amazing. That's a great background. But nothing like this. Because the rest of the pages, Here. Because the rest of the pages look like that. Look how basic that is. Because you can't really add on. Look, that's such a basic drawing. Basic. Just super basic lines and everything. And she's looking at splash art. Oh my god, this is a perfect one right here. Right here. It's just straight lines, straight lines. It's because here's the difference. She's doing an illustration, but look at the dialogue. Look at all that stuff. You have to get all this dialogue in here, talk about this and this. It's such a tiny little page and stuff like that. And hold on.
manga, they use line width and pen pressure, and that really helps in making their drawings look so amazing. So I guess even though I'm not comfortable with it, sometimes in art we have to try things that we're not sure about, so I decided to try this time. I went back to drawing Corbeau, again because I was trying a new brush out how to keep it simple. So very, very simple pose and sketch right here. To be honest, I only got this idea when I was kind of halfway done the inks. The initial pass I did with my usual pen, so no pen pressure. So that's why it looks, yeah. But when I did my second pass, I decided I'd give it a shot. Because one reason I think, let's go back to, I really want to try a thinner pen, is that look at these like super thin and delicate hatching lines in conjunction with some of these thicker ones over here. My hatching has a lot less nuance and delicacy if I restrict myself to only one line thickness. So that's really what I want to try. So I guess it's okay that I did my first draft with no pen pressure, but when I went in there and tried to add more detail, I decided to change brushes. I think throughout this phase, I was just kind of like, there wasn't really an inking pen I particularly liked using besides the one with no pen pressure. Maybe that was the problem. So throughout this process of drawing this, I was trying different things. Like here I changed brushes. I was trying a lot of different things to find a pen that was comfortable for me. And I think after a lot of adjustment, I think I found something I liked. So see, like, look at these like super kind of thin lines here. I would not be able to achieve these if I was using my old inking pen. I do think the extra pen pressure, the extra line width, does give it a level of dynamism that was missing in my work before. Stop the illustration here. But, you know, one more thing about making manga. You know, the thing about manga is that, it kind of has panels, and I haven't done that yet. And I know Clip Studio Paint used to be called Manga Studio, so it has built-in manga making tools, but I've never actually touched them before in my life. But now's a good time as any to start. So yeah, when I finished this off, I was like, okay, let's try adding a panel to it to turn it into my basically first comic. So before doing the panel, using the panels, I decided to kind of draft out what I wanted. I was just reading guides right now and experimenting, trying to figure out how this manga panel tool work. And while there is a text tool, I'm pretty confident in my hand lettering, so I just did it like this. I was thinking that, like, okay, so let's draw a chibi version of Corbeau, just kind of to have as much contrast as possible between the first frame and the second frame. And the way I can have the most contrast, I think, is have the second frame as simple as possible. If I want to show that they're outside, I just draw a simplified sun like that, okay? Not every panel has to be a complete work of art. This is probably okay. Really quick inking with my new pen, which I liked, just straight in with my new pen, which I was like, wow, I actually really like this a lot. And the final result looks like this. But anyway, that's my journey, I suppose, of using Clip Studio Paint's manga tools. Now I feel a little bit more confident that were I to start some kind of manga, or at least attempt some kind of manga, I'm a little bit better equipped to handle it right now, so maybe one day I can try making a manga. Anyway, this is a very different kind of video from usual. I hope it was still fun. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll catch you next time. Bye-bye.
They don't allow themselves the time to slow down and really feel it out because they're trying to move so quickly, because the feeling of what if it's too late.
Okay, so watching that Peacock video and everything. So what we're gonna do, we're just gonna do a black and white version of all of this. That's what I'm gonna be doing for like the next week. It's just be creating all this stuff. Today is just for me to like warm up, get back in, stuff like that. I had a long week. But this is a very simple one. And this one also follows the rules of thirds. I got the Jackie Bryant here from Virtua Fighter. No, who's from Dead or Alive? Fei Long? Chun Li. Yeah, I got the Chun Li hair going on. This is my hair right now. This is my hair. So boom, boom. And then we give me the big nose. I look at myself a lot in the face. I have to admit I'm ugly. I have to admit my ugliness. It's okay. It actually is more of a hook. I should saw that. Ooh. Using my face right here. Look at my OBS. Making faces with... Ah! I don't know. Don't draw from memories. I don't know what I'm doing. I just thought I'd draw that for fun. A little bit of practice. Okay. Let's listen to some French music. Some Pokemon French music. Alright. Alright, so you gotta remember that one of the best things you can do while drawing, set up a grid. Don't actually do anything. Even if you're using references, don't try to actually do everything from memory, like what I was doing, stuff like that, while trying to draw my face. I just draw my face. I just draw my face. I love it. I love it. Oh. So, rules of thirds are usually this general. So, boom, 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 boom. Doesn't have to be even. It just even this drawing is like that. So you see the hand right here. It doesn't actually have to be right here. It just has to go into accordance. So if you look at the hand and everything, right here, and then the rest of the body, yeah. So it's just because it's also doing perspective. So along with rules of thirds, it's going in. Yeah, it actually goes in the center. Right here. It's okay to do chicken scratches while just getting the vibes of everything. Because I'm not actually gonna I'm just trying to get the body down. I think this is Madoka Magica. Oh yeah, it goes a little bit more down. Stuff like that. Yeah. I'm just trying to get that idea. I'm just trying to loosen up before I focus on anything big. this. Oh yeah, we're gonna do this to make everything easier on the eyes, because everything is gray. Mm-hmm. Okay. So we're gonna do this right here, just because this helps out with the rules of thirds. So, yeah, let's get back here. So again, rules of thirds. Where everything's going at. Actually, how I draw it, I look to the left for everything. We're gonna have this actually be smaller. Oh, that works so much better just to try to understand everything on a composite level. So, we're gonna go here. Boom, boom, boom. Focal point. Boom. Yeah, because the head's right there. So the reason why I'm doing this is so that I'm blocking. I'm blocking so I can understand the composition without worrying about detail. And then we'll focus on line work after that. Actually, one of the things that you can do with regular hard paper is draw this idea, like just shade it on some paper. You don't have to do everything on the same paper and everything. Like, you can get the idea, like just draw squiggling signs, like just hardcore, just draw squiggling signs, and be like, okay, I think that's the idea. And then go on the other page, like tear that page off, put it underneath, and then kind of like draw over it, and like, oh, okay. Just, that's how you do thumbnails and everything. You could do thumbnails or transfer and stuff like that. Like, don't always try to like get one idea over and over again. Just get the form, get everything down, because this is what we're doing. Is just like we're trying to figure out how all this stuff is being applied. Okay. Yeah, so you just keep adding to it. I think you do like little perspective things. I'm not trying to make it exactly like this. Like, I'm just trying to understand the proportions, understand the rules of why the person did this, why the light is hitting this, how to get something similar. So because nothing is like a super hard rule. As you can see right here, boom. And then you can just add on to it if it feels wrong. Oops. Yeah, see how the hand kind of like looks a little bit weird? This is when you like just try to make it similar. And then you add in the thumb. then, yeah, right here, you add in, I just have a little bit of thing just to let myself know that this is going to be the fingers. And you don't have to do all the fingers, you just have to do composite ideas. Yeah, because we're gonna come back and like change stuff later. So. Now it just looks like a normal hand. And the idea of the hand is there. The idea of the hand is there. Yeah, because you gotta remember, also add in focal points. Oops. And remember, it's okay to do it in your style a little bit, how your proportions are. Yeah, because I started singing along with the song, my bad. Boom. Boom. Remember, we want to do like a little bit of a box for the ribs. Yeah, that makes more sense. But because the ribs are like this. I noticed that mine's a little bit more perspective. There's a little bit more flat, and they put more emphasis on the hand. So the hand is actually going a little bit more further than this. So we can just take this So elbow is right there. Because when we go up here, do that. We're also going to add in the Loomis technique by reverse engineering it. So, go right here. So yeah, you want to map everything. Just get the idea of what all that stuff is. Because what we're going to do is just put a little bit of that. And then we're going to add something and then just go over with line. Like colors and stuff. Because I'm gonna make this into a line art study. Because it goes down here. Because ribs go right here. Right there. Go right there. See how the ribs go right here, and then I'm just gonna add in female body part. I'm gonna look at my references up here. Ah. Head, yeah. Boom. This half here, fat chested. And here's where the pecs and everything are. Ribs. And then the crotch. So everything's kind of like halfway down. unbelievable. Right there. It's a child, so I don't want to like add too much detail about that. There. Yeah, because the arm goes right there. The arm goes right there. Because it's actually going on right here. So what I just did right there was because everything was going straight. But if you look at the drawing, it's a little bit more dynamic and going in. So there, boom, boom, boom. So I'm gonna look, boom, boom, boom. So right here, the ribs and everything is going right there, going in, and then it goes into like right there. So as you can see, it's making that same effect with the camera already. Going right here. And you just make that correction. You always just look at references and stuff. But here, it goes a little bit more flat. They go a little bit more flat. Because we're like still standing. I'm sitting down, so. I like to use soft brush for fixing this stuff. Yeah, because it's still a dress. Okay, so we're gonna add in the dress right here and have everything that makes sense right here. Boom. Yeah, because this is gonna be a dress. did it like at their proportions is more straight. So it's just boom. So we just boom. Then they add in the arm. And then you can't see any of this. Looks like, yeah, it's right there. So there we go. Now we'll block in a little bit of the clothes. Doing that on top of later. And we'll combine everything after that. It's a little too dark for my taste. There we go. See, we put the top layer. So the reason why I did that was because I looked at that, the proportions, turning everything. Yeah, have it more a little bit dynamic. And then I'll start. I am brain fried today, just tired. We can make this smaller. just planting the light areas just so that it can make sense later. Okay. Need to take a break.
Personal finances because no one ever believes anything I say. So I mean,
Because you are a little manipulative weasel!
ba, ba, ba. Gonna start walking, tracking stuff. Ba, boo, ba, ba. Wow, who knew I had the beat correct in my head? So, I'm making a mistake. I'm doing too much all at once. And I'm hopping all over the place. And this is just a light study. This is the reason why it's black and white, doing all this stuff. So, we're gonna go in. And work on tones and do everything one by one. So, we're gonna get rid of this. And we're gonna get rid of all this. Because we got the proportions down. We got the proportions down, my buddy. My buddy. Everything makes sense. Everything makes sense. Add in the shoulders. Because we're just doing a base layer. And look at all that stuff. I'm trying to figure out the proportions, doing all that stuff, and that's that's the problem, is the fixation. You want to start working on the tiny stuff. Nope, we gotta go on the big stuff. Big, small, big, small. That's the best thing about Sam Does Art tells you. He's 100% right. Big, small. See, that's why. You just gotta focus on the flats. I was doing too much coloring. Huh? Annyeong! Annyeong! I see you this time. I see you. Hey! Okay. I was replying to you. What are you up to? Good morning. Annyeonghaseyo. Annyeong. Did you sleep good? Yeah, so what I'm doing right here, I'm just Creed Goritipi 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 Green Go Re Goriti Griti Gratify? Gratify. Critify? Greetify? Critipy? Oh, okay. Breaker. Oh, am I on break on your video? No. Okay, I'm gonna count. So, okay, I'm gonna start. Just write down, just annyeong. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay, I think 7 seconds. I think it's a 10-second delay. It takes 10 seconds for me to see your messages. Here. Creepy? No. Good night. Not 10, I think 30. Ah, okay, 30 seconds more. Okay. Do you want to just call? Yeah, because what I'm doing right here is I'm copying this just for proportions, and then I'm learning how to do the shading, like where the light goes, where all this stuff is, how they plan it, doing all that stuff. So, so the detail in where they place the drawings, like right here, is composition. And then along with the shading and the highlighting, so highlighting where the lighting is where they want you to focus your eye on. So over here, just going right here. And what I'm doing is I'm not doing a detailed drawing. I'm just practicing how they do this, do the placement and stuff like that. So this way I can understand placement better. So along with that, everything should approve accordingly. So see how the light here goes underneath the chin, doing all that, how they place it. I got a little bit ahead of myself in drawing this because I was trying to do all the details, but what I really needed to do was just gray and then build it in layers like lasagna, like a building, like one layer, this layer, build it up. I'm gonna write to you real quick. Julie? One concurrent viewer. Okay, you're still here. Okay, I'll keep drawing. I thought you were going to reply. I'll keep drawing. Okay. So what I'm doing here now is I'm going to go erase all this. So I'm erasing all this is because I did too much detail. I did too much detail at the beginning. So I want to just focus on one layer at a time and make sure everything works all together. Because it doesn't have to look good right now. It just has to look moderately proportionate. Moderately proportionate. That's all we're going for.